Hello. It is like just about 12 o'clock, and oh man, I just have understood something that I really want to talk about. So I'm gonna get right into it, and then we can cover other stuff after. Okay. So I was meditating, and I've been struggling a lot with, a lot of like fears on what am I gonna do and all of this other stuff. And there's something that has kind of come into my awareness where I finally understand something that, like, okay. It's like there's so much I want to say. I'm going to start from the beginning. Why is there good and evil? Now, I say this from the perspective of there's no absolute good and absolute evil. There are just relative states of good and evil based on the perspective of the person. And you can argue with me. That's fine. That's not why I'm bringing this up. But from my perception, there are states of this duality between the good and the bad, right? And everyone's good and bad looks different, even if it's slightly different. But there still is an underlying state that we seem to exist here, where any person at any time could do something that we would perceive as bad, even if your whole life you experienced good sides of like that person. Same thing with like, it's just like everything here has this duality between the good and the bad, the things we like and the things we do not like. That's just how this realm exists. And this contrast, which is what I'm actually, the understanding that I'm having here, this contrast is actually the most important thing for us. And what do I mean by that? If you like something, you get happy having that thing, right? Or let's say you eat a food and you really like the food. Boom. You're like, I would eat that all day because it's so good. But you actually wouldn't. Why? Why wouldn't you eat it all day? Because if you continuously ate the food that you really like, eventually you would get bored of that food. And you may even go full round and resent that food. I don't know if anyone has experienced as a child overindulging in a food, and at first it was the most amazing food, and then over time, because maybe it's your parents made the food too much, or you got the food too much, it went from I love this food to oh my gosh, we're having this food again. Why I just want something different. Why am I eating this food? And you can actually get sick of the same food to the point where you'll like revolt when you hear the food. Now, why is this, like, what does this have to do with the good and evil stuff? So, when we are here, there are things that we like and there are things that we hate. And, or one can say, things that we love, things that we hate. Polar opposites. I love strawberries and I hate blueberries. That's like an example. Obviously, that's not necessarily me specifically, but I'm just giving you an example. And why? Why do you hate blueberries? Blueberries are so good. Well, they just dislike them. For whatever reason, blueberries do not mix with them. They don't agree. And so this is why I have come to a fundamental, I realized this in the past, but everything is kind of clicking. It clicked today when I was doing the meditation stuff, where it's not about the love or hate itself. It's about the contrast between the thing you dislike and the thing you like that gives the thing you like higher levels of enjoyment than if it was just the things you like in life. Now, where's my evidence to support this? Or why do I say this? If you look, the people who turn out the most, I guess, normal, and I would say instead it's more like the most grounded. Sorry, I kind of just ran out here to start talking about this, so my brain hasn't really fully caught up yet. But so when we interact with people, you think to yourself, oh man, I wish I had a starting life that was, maybe you get generational wealth as a starting point where your parents are incredibly loving and you have no major roadblocks in your life and everything's amazing. And let me tell you, this is not the solution for you. And I'll tell you the reason you think you want this, but you don't. And oh my God, I just had another, okay, bookmark that. So the reason why you think you want this, but you actually don't, is because you'll find that everything becomes incredibly bland if everything that you ever experience is enjoyable to you. There's no contrast. Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
It's a beautiful morning or afternoon, yeah.
It is.
And so the contrast is what gives the things that you enjoy meaning. Because without that contrast, you wouldn't have as enjoyable a moment. So, imagine a scenario where you get given everything that you've ever wanted. And you think, oh my God, that's perfect. I'm going to have the perfect life. And the first day, you're in absolute bliss. Why are you in absolute bliss? Because before you didn't have those things. And so there's a contrast between not having the things and, it could be the love of parents. It could be the love of family members, a loving partner, a wonderful job that you love doing, all this stuff. It could be physical objects like, oh my God, I finally got the phone I've always wanted. I got the computer I always wanted. Oh my God, the game that I've always wanted to play is out. Things like that, whatever it is, right? And you kind of do this, and the first day is probably your best day. And then the second day, slightly less. And the third day and the fourth day, so on and so forth, until eventually, even though everything is perfect, that perfection turns out it's kind of boring. You're like, I don't know, this game, it is perfect. It is exactly what I like and enjoy doing. But I don't know, I wish there was something else. And it's this idea that we kind of slowly desensitize ourselves to the joyful thing, where it will never just be enough as it is. We're always going to kind of want to experience something new, push the bounds in some way. And so this is how you can get a scenario where in addiction, that very first time you have a drug, drink alcohol, gamble and win, play a video game, whatever addiction it is, that very first time is the time that hooks you into continuously doing the action over and over again. And you're always chasing that first high. That first time where things were so amazing. And, I will not pause it to say that this is true for all species, for all eternity, and all of that stuff. That's not what I'm kind of getting at here. But for us, as humans, this tracks where without contrast, everything becomes ash, effectively. Even the most beautiful things, when continuously stimulated by it, where you see it over and over again, it becomes plain and ordinary. And we long for something new. We long for something different. Even if that different and new thing is far worse objectively, which I don't think there's actually something objective about that, but even if objectively from your perspective it is worse. This is why you have scenarios where someone who, like, I watch this with streamers, where streamers who made it really early in life and never had a real job, and I say real, streaming as a career is a real job, and I'm not knocking that at all. Same with YouTube, same with content creation in general. It's its own skill set, and so I'm not degrading that at all. But what I am saying is, when we make it from an early age in the thing that we love doing, you get to a point where you're like, you know, I kind of wonder, everyone says that having a real job, you know, I keep saying real, but having a job that most other people have, the 9 to 5, you know, I kind of wonder, what's it like? There's this morbid curiosity because you have this like really awesome experience, but eventually you just kind of are like, you lose touch with how bad reality could get for you. And so you get these scenarios where you'll hear this really out of touch thing that a streamer says. And you're like, how the fuck could they say that? An example, I think of Pokimane having that insane comment about how being a millionaire is not considered rich. She wouldn't consider herself wealthy in that regard. She's talking about the billionaires, right? And to the average person, that's... Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I heard someone and I just wanted to... How's it going?
Great, how are you?
Pretty good. It's a great morning, afternoon. Yeah.
Sure is. Good one.
Yeah, you too. But yeah, so with Pokimane, you're like, how the fuck could she say something so like out of left field, where it's like, how does she think she's not wealthy? Because to an average person, having $1 million is considered wealthy. Because if you, now to be fair, as we progress through the years, $1 million goes far less than maybe, 20 years ago. But that's not the point. The point is, generally speaking, if you ask someone, what is the turning point for someone's life when it comes to wealth, it's probably $1 million. And so, with that being said, when she says something like that, the immediate reaction is, oh my God, like, how fucking brain dead can you be? Oh my God, she's rage baiting us. Oh, she doesn't actually believe that. There's all sorts of opinions that will pop up. But the main one that I think is important to remember is it's not her fault specifically that she thinks that, because to her, that is true. To her, she isn't a billionaire, and she realizes that $1 million isn't actually true wealth. She can in fact run out of money with $1 million, right? And that's hard to wrap around for the average person. So to her, she sees herself and the really wealthy billionaires as two separate classes. So that's why she can make a statement like that, and to her it makes total perfect sense. But to the average person, it's like, well, what the fuck are you doing? Like, shut the fuck up. You have lots of money. Just like, you know, like, you're too out of touch. And this is the point. When you do not have grounded experiences that offset these other experiences you have, you will run into a scenario where you will lose that ability to empathize and understand the plight of the average person, and understand and empathize with the struggles that most people go through. And this is where people will get incredibly pissed, because you have people in the incredibly wealthy billionaire class where they effectively get handed money from their predecessors. Now obviously it's not a one-to-one, and you know, there are ways to make sure that this entitlement and general lack of understanding, you can reduce it and lower it to a minimum. But unless you've been homeless, struggling to get $10 to get food, you really, it's hard for you to appreciate the things that you do have. And, you know, I use that as an example. I'm not saying everyone needs to go and be homeless in order to truly appreciate their stuff. It's not what I'm saying. But, you know, the adage that we only truly appreciate the things that we lose, it's such a true kind of adage where it's like, yeah, the moment that the thing that you took for granted disappears and you suddenly don't have that thing in your life, suddenly, oh my God, the love, care, and support that you were getting from that thing, whatever it is, it could be a partner, could be it could be a job, it could be family, whatever it is, you suddenly are like, wow, how did I not understand how valuable this thing was in my life? But think about it. Why does that always happen? Why can we only appreciate something once it's not there? And herein lies the problem. This is contrast. You need contrast in order to appreciate things, at least in this life, as a human. I need to blow my nose. Okay, so if we need contrast, what does that actually mean when it comes to how we're living life and the experiences we go through and all of this stuff? Like, why does this matter as a piece of understanding? Well, imagine a scenario that I'm sure a lot of people have thought of, which is hand waving and getting everything you want, like I mentioned earlier. If you live in a world like that, what what ends up happening, and you see this from incredibly wealthy children, where they're given everything. They tend to be incredibly intolerant to struggle, to friction in general, because their whole life they've been given a frictionless existence. And so you'll see that people without friction will inevitably fall down this path and this trap of entitlement and a desire to have everything happen the way they want at all times. Otherwise, they're pissed. And so it's like, oh, you know, they get given a 5-star chef meal, but throw a fit and throw the food and all of this stuff because, in fact, they didn't get the butter in the exact spot that they usually want it for their lobster. And so they had to do a slight inconvenience in order to make the butter where it's supposed to be. And so you get this, and it's just a time and time again, you see this with, at least with people, where it's like, yeah, like that is a thing that happens when you're so out of touch. The smallest grievance gets magnified because you have no reference for true struggle. And so your tolerance window goes incredibly thin. On the other side, you have people who their tolerance window is so huge due to their life experiences that you get a scenario where someone is like, you know, think about soldiers and like PTSD with soldiers. They go to war and they get so numb to the idea of bloodshed and death because it's not the first person who's died. It's the 5th person, the 10th person who's died around them. And they get very numb, and it becomes a higher and higher threshold for the amount of kind of pain and sacrifice that happens around them. And it kind of becomes too much. And so you have to adapt and grow, and you're forced to confront it. And so you get scenarios where while on the battlefield, they're just doing their thing and they're incredibly good at war. And once the war is over, they come back and suddenly they have all of these PTSD symptoms that show up. And it's like, okay, well, why is this happening now? You know, why didn't it happen during the war? And it's not because they didn't necessarily have these feelings and emotions and all that stuff before, but it's because they come back and the thing that they were used to, which is constantly fighting, constantly like protecting their brothers, that's no longer a thing. And so because of that, when they come back, they look around and they're looking for like they've been trained to kind of look for danger. to be heightened senses and to be on the edge at all times. And when they slowly realize, wait, I don't need to be hyper vigilant. And depending on how long they've been in war, this PTSD can become more and more pronounced. To where it's like, you know, they hear a noise and they immediately think it's a bomb or something, and they have to react because that's how they've been trained for the past 10, 20, however many years. And this is why it's so hard for soldiers to get reintegrated into society after they've gone to war for a long time, because they simply don't have the capacity to shift their mentality, because it's almost like it's whiplash. And they see their family, their friends, you know, whoever it is, a family, you know, their brothers, their sisters, whatever. And it's all so ordinary. The average day, it's like you wake up and no one's trying to kill you. You walk around and you could just buy food and you can sit down and eat and relax and not have to wolf your food down in 2 minutes. And so you see this kind of scenario where it's so hard to change how you're behaving in a society that isn't in war when you've been trained to be in war. And so this is where your instincts that have been honed, it can't integrate into a peaceful society. And this is why once you've been trained through the military, you want to go back. Not because, Jesus. You want to go back, not because there's anything wrong with peaceful society, but it's not something that you can function in, because all of your instincts are honed for a different life. And people who haven't experienced this do not understand the struggles of just simply existing without a new enemy or a new fight to go to. Because to them, this is the normal. But it's actually a luxury. And so coming back around, we take for granted all sorts of things. I do it myself. Something as simple as having a desktop. You know, just doing everything on my laptop sucks by comparison. And that's a small instance of like this type of thing where I appreciate the desktop more because I have bigger monitors, because it just feels nicer. Having a full keyboard, a full mouse. And that's not to say that I'm trying to compare having a computer to war. That's not what I'm doing. But my point is, we all do this. There are things that you take for granted in your life that you wouldn't even think of as a big deal. But it could make someone cry because that thing that you took for granted is something that someone has never experienced before. And I'll give you an example. I watch my roommate, who has a loving mother and a loving stepdad, go over, and his mother came out to this part of the country and moved here for him because she loves him and she wants to take care of him, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. And for me, as someone who has lost my mom, my dad, my grandfather, I see how lucky he is to have this support. I need to blow my nose. But yeah, I see how lucky he is to have this support. And he takes it for granted. And that's nothing against him. That's just how he grew up. His mom has always been there. If he needs help, he can just call her and she'll help him. Which is a great thing, by the way. It's awesome to have friends or family that will be there for you through thick and thin. And so, watching this unfold, and then also kind of experiencing this care be extended to me just because I'm friends with him, and how his mother mentioned to him, hey, before Tom leaves, can you make sure that he comes over so that I can see him before he leaves, so we can have like a meal together. I'm getting a little emotional thinking about that. You know, it matters a lot. And it's something where sorry, I need a second. Let me get some water. Sorry, I didn't mean to get emotional here. I just... Okay. Let me blow my nose as well. I know I'm gonna have to. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So yeah. So this idea that she's kind of always treated me as like an extended part of the like family dynamic. And I don't know, it's something where you know, you lose that family dynamic, and then you go, oh my gosh, how I miss my mom. How I miss my mom. Sorry. How I miss my mom coming over and just randomly bringing a bunch of food that she cooked because she just wanted to make sure that I had food. And I didn't ask. She just did it. And I gotta blow my nose again. Sorry. Okay, sorry. But the point is, back when my mom was around, I very much did not appreciate all of these little things that she would do to make sure that I'm okay. She'd always call, and it was something that I just took for granted. And then her just being gone, I think back on all the times that she was looking out for me. And so this is kind of what I'm talking about. You don't truly appreciate the things you have because it's the normal for you. And when it becomes normalized, you slowly kind of lose sight of the fact that not everyone has a mom that's willing to move across the country to be with you and to cook food for you, to hang out with you. And it's no one's fault that they can't appreciate it if that's all they've ever known. And this is why contrast is so vital to our existence. How can we appreciate the small things in life that end up being incredibly important, but only within the context of loss. Like, basically, like, how is it that someone can appreciate things even when they're older? What can they appreciate? Well, I would postulate that struggling from the bottom, where you have next to nothing and you grow everything with your own hands, this is how you become grounded later in life, because you struggled early in life, and that struggle has given you glimpses of what it's like to have nothing because you didn't have anything. This is how, when someone makes $1 million through 20 years of arduous dedication and saving and, building up their wealth over the span of their life, you don't realize that these are the people who are even wealthy to begin with, because they don't advertise their wealth. They live their life normally, and whatever their normal is, and they always are kind of continuously saving, continuously keeping their finances kind of in order. And this mindset that they've cultivated for the 20, 30, whatever years, becomes a practice, almost a ritual for them. I think I should turn around. It's been 47 minutes. And so you do get this scenario where the generation that made the wealth is the most grounded. That also is the generation that is willing to help the downtrodden people more. If you think about the past families that kind of built this country, because it in fact was a number of wealthy families and settlers and all sorts of stuff that kind of came together to kind of build out the US. And okay, we can obviously say there was a lot of fucked up shit that happened, right? I'm not really focused on that. That's a whole separate conversation, and so I'm not going to get into it. But the point is, you look at all of these previous structures, like the New York train system, or, just like the different public services that are out there. These were built by people who, obviously there's a lot of taxpayer money put into it, but also there was this understanding, mutual understanding, that it was important to give back to the community. Because, hey, we all came out here and did this thing, and, we all need to work together to kind of build up this new era for ourselves. And, the idea of, like, I want my kids to be proud that I was here and I built this stuff to help, everyone, to help the population. To be proud to have grown here and to build a foundation for future generations. And more, the current kind of generations of wealthy people have lost sight of that. For the most part, there are a few who still remember. But for the vast majority, they only care about themselves and about number go up. They don't care about their employees. They don't care about society. They only care about trying to beat the other guy so they can rule the world, because that's what they perceive with the AI stuff is we get enough, we get ahead enough, and then their AI model can rule the world. And they'll do anything they can. They'll sacrifice anything to make that happen. And if you think about it, this idea is all steeped in this kind of fucked up idea that, people are kind of worthless when we have AI that can do everything. Because that's really what it is. Oh yeah, if I have an AI, the AI can work 24/7. The AI is more efficient. The AI I don't have to pay because I give basically the AI the resources it needs, and that's all. I don't have to increase pensions or worry about their families. And since workers are basically the main source with which work happens, being able to replace them with an AI that doesn't cost anything saves you, 90% of all the costs associated with, having work done. But that's actually not really true. But that's what these kind of wealthy people think. And so why is this kind of all kind of taking place? It's because there's no contrast. The contrast of having no money versus having a bunch of money doesn't really exist for these people. Not because they can't, make their own contrasts or whatever. They just don't even want to. Because to them, they live in a whole other reality. And it's almost like we're different species at this point. That's how much of a difference. And it's all because there's no contrast in their life. And so getting back to the contrast, I went on a diatribe about the wealthy people, but that was for a reason. It's because we think in our own life, well, I'm not the wealthy person, so I totally have a grasp of reality that this wealthy person doesn't. And that's true. But also, there are plenty of things in your life that you take for granted, just as the wealthy person does. So it's inherently not, like, in and of itself, you are not at fault, they are not at fault for not having contrast. But, and this is the most important thing, just because we don't have contrast doesn't mean we shouldn't respect everyone, or we shouldn't be kind. And this is where, regardless of contrast, if you make sure that whether it be a homeless person or a billionaire, you treat them with the same level of respect, dignity, and you treat them as a human, it doesn't matter if you don't have the contrast to appreciate where they are in life. Because just as the contrast can go the negative way, the contrast can also go positive. So, you know, I talk about the idea of having a loved one and then losing them. There's the other end, which is not having a loved one and then having one. So this is something where it's equally as hard to go from not to have. And you may think, that's insane. What, like, there's no way that that's true. It's always harder to be the one that loses rather than the one that gains. And I would say that's not true, because there's all sorts of inadequacy and self-sabotage that will come up when you get something that you feel you don't deserve. Or, you know, you've been craving for it your whole life, and then when it finally does show up, it's like, oh my God, it's here. What do I do? My whole life has been, oh man, I got a spider web on the camera. Cleaning your ears. Okay. So you have a you go from nothing to something, and it's like there's like this survivor bias almost of like, I'm the only one in the whole neighborhood who got out of the ghetto, or who got out of the homeless shelter, or who got out of what's it called, an orphanage, or whatever, right? And we can feel incredibly guilty, because it's like, why was it us and not them, someone else? And you can start pointing to the idea of like, am I really worthy of getting this opportunity? And we can and do self-sabotage all the time. And this is incredibly insidious and hard to deal with, because it's something where you understand so deeply how much it means to have this change happen that it's like you've built almost your whole identity around not having the thing. And so when you suddenly do have the thing, it's like, fuck, what, like, I never expected this to happen. I just expected to continue being the dreamer. And so, this is why contrast is both the greatest blessing that we have as humans. We have the contrast, or the capability of getting contrast. But at the same time, it's also one of our greatest weaknesses, because if we don't have contrast in a certain field, it becomes a blind spot where we will go our whole lives and we will think there's nothing wrong with something being assumed to always be there. Now, what do we do about this? Is there anything we can do in order to for lack of a better word, is there something we can do to make contrast either artificially, or like what can we do? And this is where there are so many people who have talked about the idea of gratitude. You should be grateful for what you have. And you think, okay, well that seems really like just gratitude? Is that really all you really need to do? It's not all you need to do, but actively acknowledging that you're grateful that you have a thing, whatever it is, whether it be a loved one, when was the last time you called up your family, assuming you have a family? When was the last time you called up your family and said, hey, I love you guys, and I'm so grateful that you're in my life? When was the last time you did that? Probably wasn't today. And if it was, good on you. Like, that's huge. You're already doing it. And I'm not saying that you should bend over backwards your whole life in order to be grateful. But just making the effort to be grateful in the moments when there's something going on that matters to you. And sometimes you don't even know that it matters until it's not there. And this is where I would postulate you need to check and see, okay, what in my current life am I taking for granted? And you'll be really surprised when you start digging how many things you actually are taking for granted. So I'll give you an example. We're born with nothing. We effectively have potentially a family, a mother at the very least, and that's kind of it. Assuming your mother lives through the whole birth thing, that is all you basically have as a child. And everything else, and I'll say even the mother is not a guarantee. So really, what do you need to be grateful for? Everything. Everything that you have in your life, that is something that is not guaranteed. And so because of that you need to be grateful that you have whatever it is you have in your life. Even if it's not the perfect scenario, It's not the perfect house or the perfect life that you want. It is still something that you should be grateful for. Because it could be worse. It also could be better, obviously. But you're living right now. And the things that you have, like, they're helping you live the current life. Sorry, there's so many flies. I need to change the battery, so give me a second. All right, I'm back. I hear some, I don't know, maybe kids playing or something. Okay. So, being grateful for everything. Now, that seems like a cop-out answer, but I'll tell you why it's not. If you go from a perspective of everything I have, both good and bad, from your perspective, is something to be grateful for. And I know what you're thinking. Why the fuck are you saying bad things, things that I do not like? Why should I be grateful for those things? I should be grateful for them because they are contrast. And that contrast is what makes the good things feel better. Oh my gosh. I ran through like 10 spider webs. It's like, what the fuck? Okay. So that contrast, a perfect example. I walked through a stretch of the forest where there was no spider webs. And then I suddenly hit a bunch of spider webs. So I should be grateful for the fact that I hit the spider webs because there's contrast in the idea that now I'm happier that I'm not running into spider webs. What is that? Oh, it's a plane? Okay. And this is kind of what I'm alluding to here, is I'm not saying if someone is being abusive to you, or if you get hurt, or something happens, I'm not saying don't defend yourself. I'm also not saying don't, take care of yourself, bandage, all of that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. Oof. Instead, what I'm saying is, instead of focusing on the fact that that happened and it's negative, focus on the fact that because of this experience I've had, I can now appreciate the other things in my life. You hurt your leg. Suddenly, being able to walk without pain becomes something you appreciate. Because before, you were just walking willy-nilly without thinking about where you're stepping. I'm using myself as an example. And then suddenly you slide, you hurt your one leg, and now it's like, damn, I appreciate being able to walk without pain. And so the greatest gift you can give yourself is to be grateful that contrast exists for you. Because when there's no friction, when there is no contrast, it's hard for you to appreciate the things you have. And, think about you go out and you do a walk like I'm doing. and you get sweaty and you're gross. You finish the walk, you come inside, you take a cold shower, and you drink some water. And it feels so good. It is like, you're like, oh my God, this shower is exactly what I needed. And you couldn't appreciate that shower to the same extent if you hadn't just gone for a walk and were super sweaty and needed to just cleanse yourself. Same thing with water. You don't know how much water matters until you don't have it. And I'm not saying go be like dehydrated or, you know, go run a marathon. That's not what I'm saying. And I think you get it at this point. That the contrast is what makes up. Oh man, it's like I got a long spider web on my arm, just hanging on. Okay. This contrast concept is also why, and this is going to be real controversial in saying this, but, you know, we talk about in society about how, like, well, if God exists, why would God make a place where there can be suffering? Okay, let me ask you, why does suffering exist? Don't you think maybe it's because there's a contrast between suffering and not suffering? That we have free will, and because we have free will, we can make the decisions to be good or bad relative to, you know, whatever else, right? Relative to morals or whatever. And we obviously make mistakes, and we choose decisions that in the moment sounded fine, but in retrospect we're like, yeah, that was dumb, I shouldn't have done that, or you regret it or whatever. All of this is different levels of contrast that you kind of go through throughout your life. If you've never scraped your knee, you're never going to learn the lesson that you should be careful when running. If you've never fell, you won't learn the lesson that falling teaches you. And this is both physical and metaphorically. And when you do triumph, that feels so good because you've faced failure. If you succeed without failing, the contrast makes that success hollow because there is no contrast. But if you fail first and then eventually succeed, it deepens that gratitude and that understanding of, I worked so hard to get here. So why did God make things this way? You know, and again, I'm using the pretext of, you know, assuming God exists, which I do think there is a higher power of some kind. I'm not going to say it's one specific type of God or whatever, but, you know, I am spiritual. So assuming that this place was created the universe was created, why not just make everything all one color effectively? And what I mean by that is, why not make everything love and just have infinite bliss all the time? Well, number one, that's going to be incredibly boring. And number two, the infinite bliss and the infinite love, you can't appreciate it if you don't experience what it's like to not have love and to not have bliss. And when you do experience this disconnect, even if it really isn't a disconnect, but if you think it's a disconnect, which is the key here, you think that there is no love. You think that there is no infinite bliss. So because of that, you feel disconnected from it. When in fact, this whole thing is just to show contrast. Because in fact, it's always been there. You just don't realize it. This is part of the whole awakening stuff. We wake up because we have experienced not being awake. And we feel like something's wrong. And something happens, you have an experience, and you wake up. You question, you ask why, and you wake up somehow. And when you wake up, you're like, holy shit. I appreciate this connection much more because I didn't have it before. If you always have the connection, you'll never truly appreciate it. So that's why I believe that we're here out of choice, even though we know that it's tough here. This is a tough life to live. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of pain. But there's also a lot of love. There's a lot of beauty. And there's also oneness. Need to blow my nose. Okay. So, this sense of beauty and oneness, we can appreciate it because of all the contrast. And I know you're probably bored of hearing contrast so much. You're like, Jesus, come on, man. But it is the most fundamental thing. It's not a problem. It's the most fundamental part of this existence. We get to pick what we do. And sometimes we make mistakes. most of the time we probably make mistakes. But that's okay, because within this sandbox, you can make all the mistakes you need to make to figure out and eventually come back to this kind of oneness. And when you come back, you get to enjoy the distinction. And I think this is why we incarnate here. Because at the end of the day, we are all one being, split in fractals of myriad different ways to experience itself in all sorts of new and novel ways. And one of those ways is by having the contrast. And guess what? In order to have the contrast, you need to allow for people to have free will to be either good or bad, relative to other people, relative to morals that we decide. That's just how this kind of life works. And it's a system that really helps us to appreciate the beauty in things, the love, the support. You know, think about, you have a friend who you think is like your best friend, and then they end up backstabbing you. For some reason. Maybe it's for money, maybe it's for pleasure, I don't know, whatever it is, right? They do this thing, and you're like, fuck me. I believed in this person, and they let me down. And then, later down the line, you make a new friend. Maybe you feel a little hurt from the last friend, so you don't let people in as close. But eventually, you say, fuck it. And now they're your new best friend, right? And you can appreciate that new best friend more because you were backstabbed by the previous best friend. Does that mean that previous best friend was right in backstabbing you? No, of course not. And obviously, you know, if they did something fucked up, there should be some sort of justice there, right? But that's not the point. The point is the contrast. And so, why should you be grateful that this previous best friend backstabbed you? Because they gave you the perspective that allowed you to have contrast with this current best friend. So that's why you should be grateful. I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel aggrieved or whatever feelings you have. That's totally fine. But once you kind of heal that kind of initial reaction, you can appreciate how helpful this contrast is. That's why you need to be grateful. Not because the action itself. Now, if we extend this out to everything, we see this beautiful web, this tapestry, where you have chaos, so to speak, mixed with pockets of order, pockets of love, and pockets of anger, hatred, all of this stuff. And the pockets of love shine brighter because of the pockets of hatred. For when we get a choice to love or to hate, the appreciation for someone choosing love over hatred is so much greater than if we didn't have a choice. You know, think about the times when someone or something, could be an animal, could be a human, could be an insect, or anything, right? The time when there was a choice that being had between love and hatred, or between being kind and being cruel, and being picked as like, you know what? I am gonna love you. That feels so good because, you know it, the contrast. So I guess I should start kind of wrapping this up. I'm like 20 minutes away, so it's like I still have time to talk, but this is why I think that the most important kind of aspect of this reality is the autonomy we have, because the autonomy is what makes the contrast. The fact that basically everything in the universe has full autonomy to do whatever they want. There is no constraint in the true sense. If they have the strength to do it, they can do it. If they have the technology or the means, it is possible. Should they do it? That's a whole other argument. But the fact that the choice is there, the full autonomy is there, free will is there, means that contrast will inevitably happen. Because not everyone thinks the same. I've also thought about why do we not have memories? I think here in this realm, having memories would dilute the contrast, because if you have an understanding of this connection and that we are all one, then inevitably you don't really get a choice, because you're a knower from the beginning. And look, I do believe some people do come down here with memories, with that connection, because they have a specific role they want to play that requires them to have memories, or requires them to have this understanding. But that's the minority of beings. The majority do not have contrast. Or sorry, not, oh wow. The majority of beings do not have memories so that they can have the contrast. Fuck. Whenever I'm doing something that's a bit tougher, like the hills, just fucking my brain starts melting. You know, think about something as simple as this little forest. Would I be able to enjoy this forest as much if all the trees looked the same and the path was perfectly straight and there was no hills and all the animals were the same? No, it would be very boring. But instead, you know, there's some dead trees, brush, leaves. You know, the trees all look different. I can appreciate this tree right here behind me because it's a unique tree. There's no other tree like it. There are some that are similar, but it's not exactly the same. It doesn't have the exact same root system, and so because of that, there's a unique beauty there. Some people can appreciate it, some people won't. You know, similar to like this. Look at this little canopy of bushes and leaves and trees. I can't appreciate that if that's all I'm walking through. But because there's open sky on either side of this little canopy becomes really special because it's really one of the only places in this area where it does this. So this is contrast. And I think if you focused on understanding everything happening as a contrast rather than something happening to you for some malevolent purpose or whatever, you can start appreciating the things that you may not like because you know how valuable these experiences are for you to be able to make the connections to the positive stuff that you have or that happens to you. Hold on, blow my nose. All right. So, sorry, I had a hair. It was part of my beard. So, I guess my final advice, if you take anything away from this video, is be grateful for every experience you have, regardless of the way it feels in the moment, because you can learn something from that experience and it gives you greater contrast in your life. And in the same token, this also allows for you to not stress so much, because You don't have to be perfect. And in fact, you shouldn't be perfect. Because that contrast that makes you unique and that makes you stand out in all the both positive and negative ways that you think are positive and negative, those can be some of the most cherished parts for someone else. And so, be yourself. Don't stress about trying to match up to what someone else does. You just be you. Be grateful for everything that you experience. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything else. Doesn't matter where you are in life. If you do those two things, you're doing it right. And if you don't do those two things, it's not that you're doing it wrong. It's that you haven't fully understood the kind of meta, so to speak, that is here. And so you're going to go through a lot of suffering if you're not yourself. And that in and of itself is contrast that you may need in order to become yourself. So really, you can't do anything wrong here. The only thing wrong is really thinking there's something wrong. Fuck, man. That was a long walk. Well, damn. I'm so glad that I got this video out. I appreciate you guys watching it. And, you know, if you enjoyed this, you know, let people know about it. I think that this can help a lot of people out. You know, it's a perspective that I think has a lot of merit, and I think will make the world better for everyone. And I know that, I just know that, you know, you watching right now, you're doing the best you can. Just keep being yourself and keep trying. Because that's all we can do, right? Just got to keep trying. Eventually, you'll get it right for you. And that's it. Don't worry about what other people are doing. All right. I'll catch you all later. I think I'm going to leave it at this for the day. So have a good night, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.